Are you spending hours on your drum tracks wondering why they sound rigid, mechanical, and nowhere near as professional and unique as your favorite songs? In this video, we're going to be making punchy tech house drums by reverse engineering CASSIMM song Valerie. But get this, we're going to see if we can do this in under 30 minutes to spend less time overthinking and more time creating by following the 80-20 rule of drum production. What you're listening to is the finished song we'll be breaking down today. We'll be focusing on drum programming, groove, and sound selection, going layer by layer in the original order I followed while recreating these drums, so you have a framework to follow instead of just relying on intuition. But it gets even better. If you want to take a closer look or save time by using any of these drum parts for your own productions, you can find a link to this video's project files in the description, as well as over 30 project files based on Beatport Top 100 hits, with new files being added weekly. Because having produced music for over 15 years, reverse engineering drums in this way is easily the fastest and most accurate way I've come across to move away from boring, repetitive, and mechanical drum loops and closer to what you hear in chart-topping tracks. The first secret is to drag the song you want your drums to sound like into your project so you can flick between that reference and what you are working on. The most efficient way is to focus on one drum layer at a time, first focusing on the pattern, then the sound selection, and finally the volume. But this reference track preparation is only the first part of this. The real magic is in the how and why we'll be choosing our sounds and writing our drum parts. So let's jump into Ableton right now to show you how you can easily replicate the sound, quality, and groove of your favorite music's drum tracks by harnessing the epic power of the 80-20 rule. Alright, so this is a look at the Ableton project file for this one. And so what I've been doing is using a stem separator. In this instance, I was using something called Nuo stems. And I'll isolate out the drums, just like this. There we go. So this is the drums from the CASSIMM tune. And why I find this useful is two things. One is it's easier to like slice out little pieces. So you can see here I extracted the kick drum, over here the hi-hat, or the snare rather, I think, and then over here is the open hi-hat. So this, by like separating it out like this, it's a nice way for you to snatch those little pieces. And also once you grab them, then you can right click and do show similar files, and then find something similar in your library to what you just grabbed from the reference track, which is super useful. And then also something I've been doing is, well, I guess I'll show you in a second, but the idea is to then you do the kick first. And what I've been doing actually is, maybe I should just do it in actual order. So let me show you what I do. So first I'll get those drums separated, and then I'll slice out one of the kicks and then do the kick drum first. So the kick looks and sounds like this. So it's just a classic 4 on the 4 pattern. Just going 1, 2, 3, 4 in terms of the pattern. One thing that I do too is the template that I have. If you go back here and go to this Pro Ableton 12 template, this video here, and then also all these videos are in a playlist in the YouTube description as well if you wanted to check that out. I have my template set up so these notes and like the notes for, let's say, the claps and the snares and the open hi-hats and all that, they're already set in here with a MIDI clip, because it's almost always going to be this anyway. So it's just kind of a time saver thing, something I recommend you do as well. And then also there's this little like trick that I added here. Just like a little da-da-da-da at the end of every couple bars there. And then in terms of the sound, something that I've been doing that I really love is this. So I found this thing, I think somewhere on Reddit, someone was posting about this. It's called Drum Clone. And basically once you like snatch that little piece of kick from the reference track, you drag it into here. This is what it sounded like first. You can hear there's like hi-hats and all sorts of like gunk on there. And then this is what this little plugin is doing. So it does a really nice job of taking the kick out of the reference and removes like any hi-hats or claps or snares or percussion or anything like that to get you a really nice kick. So then you're in a nice position where you can do one of two things. You can do like the show similar sound and with a really nicely isolated kick to find similar stuff in your library, or you can just use this. In this instance, I just use this. And then a little bit of processing. What I'm doing here is a little bit of drum bus. Main thing is using this boom feature here, which can be useful for kind of adding a little bit more low end, a little bit of subbiness to the bottom of the kick. But I've also just only brought it in by about 18%, so nothing too crazy. I've been playing with this little snapback device that's really cool. It can add transients. In this instance, I was trying to add like this club kick transient, so it adds again a little bit more like body to the bottom. The saturator's doing nothing. This EQ is doing nothing, but I have it, I think they're here. Sometimes what I might do is have this set up to just turn it off and on. It's more of like an arrangement trick to remove the low end out of the kick, kind of like how DJs do it. And then a little spectrum, not really using this, and then K-clip just as a mixing thing that we can get to at the end. But really, the main thing here is, like, you can see here, this was only subtly added in. Everything else is very subtle. It's really just finding the right pattern, finding a similar sound, in this case actually extracting the sound, and then just flicking back and forth to get the volume correct. The idea I find is to focus first on like whatever sound is coming through the most to you, because that's probably the sound that's the most important. I started with the open hi-hat because when I was listening to this, the open hi-hat sounded like the most important thing. So let me turn off like the AI one, and then this is what we have. So let's take a look and listen to this open hi-hat. Okay, so in terms of first the pattern is like this offbeat thing. That's like, you can see here, it's like on the offbeat. Do. Very, very common with hats and open hi-hats. Again, that's why I have it so the template just kind of starts off like this. And then what I did was I actually took this sample here, which is from the, I actually extracted that out from the reference track, and then I layered it in with a couple of different hits. So 5 and 17. This one, which is a little bit more on the left, and then 17? And this one, which is just kind of sounds similar. Well, not really. It just sounds more like loose and open, like how I feel like it sounds on the original. So what I did in this instance is I have this like open hat track here, and it's set up like this, and I already have some open hat sounds that I like quite a bit, whatever this is, 4, 5, or 6 or something like that. And the idea is I've already reduced the amount of hat sounds in this instance to what I really like, and I find works really well. So that way I'm not digging through 100 samples every single time. This way I can just start with this. I can layer in one of the reference tracks. I can do the similar sound thing if I want to also. And it just speeds things up. So what I did is just layered up a bunch of different sounds like that. And also in terms of the pattern, there's just one little extra note that happens at the end of the second bar here. And then in terms, other than that, the main thing was just setting up the volume. So just flicking back and forth and setting the volume. So the main thing I'm doing here is flicking back and forth, making sure the pattern's right, flicking back and forth, making sure that the sound is as close as I can, and then flicking back and forth and getting the volume right. Then in terms of any processing on the open hat here, there's pretty much nothing. We're just removing some of the lows here. That's about it. So then the next element, so that's what that sounds like altogether. Then the idea is to flick back to the reference, hear what you think is coming out the most. And for me, that was kind of like the snare and hat combo. So the next thing I added in was the snare. So let's have a look and listen to this. So for this, this was the kind of where it started. Just one of these. It's on the 2 and the 4, then the 2 and the 4. And then I found, okay, I'll get to the, let me get through the pattern first. Then what I did here also is this little kind of like pickup note. So like do katika, katika. So I added that in as well. In terms of the sound, how I found this was in the AI separated drum track, I snatched one of the snares. Let me just show you what this looks like. I do have a video on this too, actually. What is that? It's this one here. The better system to steal kick samples from pro artists. The idea essentially is you can like extract a bit from the reference track and then right click it and say show similar files. and then this is like the sound. Okay, so this is with the hi-hat, but it'll find you similar sounding samples within your library. And so that is how I ended up getting these two snare sounds. And then I just layered them on top of each other. So I use that little similar sound functionality to find the sound. And then the last thing was the volumes, flicking back and forth between the volumes. In terms of any processing, just removing some of the lows. So again, this is that like channel strip. I have this just set up all the time on each track, so I can mix as I go really quickly, work through things nice and fast. Usually what I like to do is layer snares and claps together. Snare kind of more down the middle, and then the claps to the left and right, adding some like a little bit more high end and some like stereo width to it. So let's have a listen, look and listen to that. And let's solo the claps. And together. So for the claps here, you can see again, it's kind of that idea, 2 and 4, 2 and 4. Similar to the open hi-hats, I have like a bunch of clap sounds that I like already like set up here. And so I just found 2, and then I think I have them played, what is it, 12 and 8. 12, 8. They're both down the center. Sometimes I might push one to the left, push one to the right. In this instance, what I did instead was use this width bit here. So what this is a free plugin called Polyverse Wider, and it's really nice for just pushing things to the left and right, making them more stereo, making it so there's space in the middle for whatever you want down the middle, in this instance the snare. And I've set it up so that the main knob on that is just added to this one little knob here, so I don't have to go about opening it every time, adding it in here, opening up the plugin, finding out where on the weird interface it is. It's just boom, add some width, move on. And then we're just removing a bit of the lows here. And yeah, nothing too crazy in terms of the processing on the channel. You can see the main thing was flicking back and forth and finding the right balance of volume. That's really the main thing. So the next thing that I wanted to add in was the closed hi-hats. So let's take a look and listen to that. And let's solo it. So it's just kind of like a, what would this be? 8th notes or 16th notes? So it's like a shuffly kind of sounding hi-hat thing. Let me explain this. It looks more confusing than it might be. So the thing is, I always start off with this right here. So try to just focus on just what I'm showing here. I'll always start the hi-hat on this like offbeat, just like the open hi-hat, to reinforce the open hi-hat. And this makes that open hat cut through a little bit more as well, like adds like almost like a bit of punch to it. But then also it's super useful as an arrangement trick, because then if you ever want to pull out the open hat, remove it from a section of the song, you still have the closed hat playing in its place. So that's super useful. Then basically what I did was then added in like the ticka ticka tickas around that sound. And so it looks maybe a little more confusing than it is, but this is usually how I'd start this. I think I might have explained this in another video, but the idea is like it might start like this. And then the idea is to like do like just use one hat sample to get the pattern. And then I'll start playing with the velocities and moving them onto different hi-hats. So different hi-hat samples are playing in an effort to kind of humanize the sound a bit more. It's playing at different velocities. You can see I'm dragging the down, like the little randomization velocity range thing. So it's always hitting a little bit differently. If you don't know how to do that, how to do that, I think you could click it and then you go down here and then you press Command and you can see you're changing the velocity range of like where it might hit whenever that note comes around. So yeah, just an effort to kind of humanize things. And what I'll usually work is in chunks. So maybe like something like this is where I'll start and then copy and paste that over and then make like just an adjustment. So it's like slightly different each time. You can see the difference between here and here. These first two sections is this one's playing on 13 here. And then this exact same pattern's happening, but instead this one's playing. So you can see just slight little different things. And then it's over here, slightly different again, just slowly changing it throughout time. That adds that kind of humanization and makes it sound a little bit more interesting and evolving in a really, really subtle way, which is important with like kind of repetitive house music, stuff like this. But yeah, then once the pattern's good, like the sound selection for this, again, what I did was I have like pre-selected hats. So I just kind of like use my ear, flick back and forth between the reference and what I have here, and tried out the different samples, try to find what worked the closest. And then that way, yeah, that worked pretty quickly for me. And then what we're doing is a little bit of processing. We're using this transient shaper here to bring down the attack so the initial hit isn't hitting as hard. So it kind of like blends it, pushes it back a bit more in the mix almost, makes it less punchy almost. And then what we're doing is just removing a bit of the lows, making room for like the bass and the kick and all that. And then but the main thing really was just setting up the volume. So then what I usually like to do with the drums is once like the core sounds are set in with MIDI and like individual one-hit samples. So we have like the kick, we have the open hat, the snares, the claps, the hi-hats. Then what I like to do is layer in like audio loops. So top loops or like percussion loops over like more like underneath these core hits to fill out the sounds a bit, make it a little bit more complex and interesting and like have a bit more of a interesting vibe. So let me walk you through how I added each one. So first I added this top loop here. Let's solo it. So it's mostly kind of just reinforcing that hi-hat sound, making it a little bit more shuffly, and there's also a couple of cool little bongo hits kind of in there. In terms of, for this I would just look up top loops in like Splice or house breaks and stuff like that. One thing I did do is I clicked into it and I set if you have the warp algorithm to beats and on transients and then switch it so that the little arrow's pointing to the right, you can drag this down and it'll tighten up the sustain of each one of these hits. And that's a nice way to have it blend in a bit more so it's not as loose and floppy. It's tighter, and so it's going to like nestle in between your core hits a little bit better. And then something that I actually did do that I also forgot to mention is I've extracted the groove from the drum bit. So like, let me explain this nicely. So we isolated out this little drum part here, and then what I did is right-clicked it and said extract grooves. Extract grooves, and this is a nice way that you can take the groove out of the drum rack from the reference that you have, and then you can apply it to everything that you got here. So this will slightly move the hits off the grid a little bit and change the velocities a little bit based on those changes that are happening that you extracted from the actual drum track. So it's a nice way to kind of force all these different elements into the same kind of groove and vibe by applying that to like most of these clips here. Not all of them. Sometimes I'm using like the MPC shuffle groove kind of thing. Kind of want to use your ear, and it's not always like going to be the what you want to do all the time. But in this instance, I'm using the extracted groove on this top loop here. And then in terms of any processing, we're moving some of the lows, make room for the kick and the bass. Just a little side chain so it's pumping, doing that cool dancey thing, and like making room for the kick, and a little bit of that one knob width to push it to the left and right, and then just a little bit of volume. This, sometimes with these top loops, you're kind of flicking back and forth to the reference, but you might be just kind of more dialing it into taste against your core sounds. Next up, I added this. Now let's solo it. So this again is like kind of like this is a shaker, and it's like kind of shuffly, like shuffling, doing the shuffly cool hi-hat kind of thing, reinforcing the hi-hats. What I did here was nothing crazy on here, just applied that groove. Removing a ton more of the low end, a little bit of that side chain, a little bit of width. Nothing too crazy. You can see it's dialed in, like if the clap is at -2, these little top loops are at like -11 and -10. So you see it's much more subtly mixed in. Next up is this next loop here. Let's solo that. So this is a bit more like snary, with some like hi-hats in it, but it's mostly kind of like reinforcing and adding some like interesting character to the core snare. What we're doing is the same little drum groove idea trick, and then tightening these up quite a bit so that they're blending in a lot more with the core hits, and then removing some lows, a little bit of side chain, and then one more that we'll go over here is this last one, which I think is bongo sounds. and let's solo it. So this just like with all these, just looked it up on Splice bongos, and then was playing through it against this as I was also listening to the track here to find something that I thought sounded good. What are we doing here? Just applied some of that groove and then removing some lows, a little sidechain, a little bit of width. And then that is a listen to the drums. So let's have a listen to the drums. And then this is like the stem separated drums. And then what we got. So different, I would say, but also similar. So that's kind of the idea, to try to make it like inspired by the reference tune, but not exactly a carbon copy. This way it's something more, a little more unique that you could actually use. Then moving on from that, what we have now would be all of this. Hi, my friend, Matt from Best Friends Club here. And if you've been paying attention, then you probably figured out what the 80-20 rule is when it comes to building out your drums. The goal here is to get 80% of the results with only 20% of the time, energy, or effort. And because the first key to the 80-20 rule for drums is to use a reference track, we're making sure that we're effortlessly hitting 80% of a very professional sounding track. In particular, we focus on nailing the pattern, sound selection, and the volume compared to the reference track so that we keep things fast and focused as we're building out our drums. The second key of the 80-20 rule here is to mix as you go in an extremely streamlined way by only focusing on the volume as well as a simple repeatable channel strip for each track that we're adding to our drums. The third and final key is to repurpose your old project files and to build up a suite of powerful templates, Ableton racks, and one knob effects that you've personalized and curated over time. If you'd like to get a head start by downloading all the racks, templates, and all the files that you've seen me use in the Ableton project file for this video, or if you'd just like to take a closer look at any of the techniques or tracks you saw me work on in this video at your own pace, you can find a link to this video's project files on screen now, and at the second link that's in the YouTube description. I'm recreating a different song from the Beatport top charts every single week and making the project files available to anyone who wants them. You'll also get access to a private Discord where you can ask me and the community questions, as well as share tracks for feedback. If you or your music are not quite ready for a shot in the arm like that, I've also made you a completely free bundle of templates, samples, and special bonuses that have helped me figure out how to completely finish one new song each and every single week. And you can grab that free Ultimate Song Finishing Toolkit by visiting the first link that's in the YouTube description here. However, if you just feel like staying on YouTube for now, that's totally fine. Save that link for later and check out this playlist of videos where I remake drums from other songs from the Beatport top charts. Or if you want to take what you've learned in this video to the next level, definitely check out this video right here.